In the previous life, Frederick, the crown prince of the Beijing circle, died to save me. In this life, I rushed to him before he fell in love with me. We were in love for 3 years and were extremely affectionate. On the wedding day, however, he abandoned me without looking back for his first love. The wedding can be reheld, the guests can be invited again. It's just a wedding. I don't know what you're making a fuss about, he scolded me. But what he didn't know was that there would never be a wedding between him and me again. Because I would soon forget him. I would remember everyone except him. It was the punishment for not getting his wholehearted love. The last time I saw Frederick like this was when I was kidnapped in the previous life. His hands were clenched tightly, and the veins on them were bulging. On his handsome and innocent face, there was no color. At this moment, he was wearing a tuxedo, looking noble and elegant, but on the wedding stage, he looked lost and stared at me. Sharon, Doris is threatening to jump off the building. I must go there right now, he said. Doris was his childhood sweetheart. She was also the person he once said he hated the most. Frederick, when did you start liking her? I asked in a low voice. Frederick was stunned for a moment, and his eyes dodged a little. Sharon, what nonsense are you talking about? The only one I like is you. To prove that he was telling the truth, he took my hand and the wedding continued. However, his heart was in turmoil, and I could feel it as I stood beside him. He subconsciously squeezed my hand hard, making it turn red. Mr. President, if you don't go to Miss Doris now, I'm afraid she'll really jump, said Linja, his most trusted assistant. I hadn't seen him all morning. It turned out that he had been staying with Doris. The man beside me froze. The overlapping wine glasses tilted sideways, and the hot red wine spilled onto my wedding dress. Sharon, I'm sorry. She needs me more at this moment. You know, she has depression. Her parents died early. I can't watch her do something stupid. After saying that, he turned and left. He was in such a hurry that he even forgot to put down the wine glass. The grand marriage alliance of the crown prince of the Beijing circle, where the groom abandoned the bride and left on the spot, was explosive news for countless people. The people present were restless. I gave a decent speech of thanks and then left under the protection of bodyguards. Standing on the rooftop of the Sharon family building, I looked down. It was so high. I almost forgot that after Frederick died in the previous life, I also stood on this rooftop, overlooking the ground. So, the happiness snatched like this really couldn't last long. I smiled bitterly. Ding dong, Sharon, we meet again. A cold mechanical voice rang in my mind. I curled my lips and calmly looked into the distance. So I failed, right? Lord System. I don't have a system. It was my sister who was bound to the system. In the previous life, Frederick was supposed to have an arranged marriage with her. Because she disappeared when she was on a quick transmigration mission, it became him and me. We were like the falling in love after marriage in novels. At first, we were on guard against each other. Little by little, we fell for each other. Under the intoxication of alcohol one time, we let our guards down. Although it was an arranged marriage between wealthy families, we truly fell in love with each other. We hugged under the sunset. We kissed by the sea. He was so gentle. He would bring warm milk before I went to sleep, sit by the bedside, prop up my body and feed me. When I woke up, he would smile gently, tap the tip of my nose, call me a lazy cat and wake me up. He would gradually walk into my heart. On one night after another, we were both restrained and indulgent with that passion. Like the prince and princess in a fairy tale, we lived happily. But later, a kidnapping planned by Doris destroyed everything. On the day of the kidnapping, it was a rainy day. I was tied up with ropes, hopelessly staying in an abandoned warehouse. Frederick found me regardless of everything. When the dagger was about to stab me, he stood in front of me. Sharon, don't be afraid. I'll always protect you, he said, his face pale, but still carefully comforting me. I hugged his body and cried bitterly. His hand stubbornly wiped away the tears on my cheeks. Sharon, don't cry. Marrying Sharon is the most correct thing I've ever done in my life. Sharon, I bought that painting you like the most. It's in the safe. The password is your birthday. Sharon, I love you. If there's an afterlife, wait for me to come and marry you again. He just lost his breath like that, and my world collapsed. In a spring, he walked into my world. But in another spring, he left me forever. I quietly arranged his funeral. In despair, when I was standing on the rooftop ready to jump down to be with him, my sister found me. She said that she had used all the points she earned from doing tasks over the years to exchange for a chance of rebirth for me. As long as we could fall in love again. Want to see? The system still said in a cold tone. I nodded. After saying that, many images suddenly flashed through my mind. On the rooftop of the Frederick family's twin towers, Doris was standing there. Many people were standing behind her. Frederick was standing in the front. He was still as handsome as ever, with deep eyes and an air of nobility. He carefully stretched out his hand, looking exactly like the way he wiped away my tears in the previous life. He said affectionately and nervously, "Doris, don't do something stupid. Come down quickly." Doris shook her head. "Frederick, I won't come down. You're going to marry someone else. I don't want to live." I don't know how many times Doris has threatened to commit suicide like this. She seemed quite proficient at it. The man shook his head desperately. "No, I won't marry anyone else. Be good. Come down quickly. I love you. It's always been you. I won't marry anyone else. Will you come down, okay?" Perhaps there was wind on the rooftop, and it blew out my tears for no reason. I watched them hug and cry. I watched Doris smile triumphantly. I clenched my fingertips tightly in my palm, and the nails hurt my flesh, but I also forced a smile. Actually, I had already expected this. Because a few days ago, Doris had secretly asked to meet me. It turned out that she hadn't been sent abroad by Frederick. Instead, she was being pampered by Frederick like a canary in the villa area next to our wedding house. Frederick's business trips and social engagements were all to be with her. In the previous life, he loved me so deeply that for a whole 3 years, I was completely kept in the dark. I saw the photos of them hugging under the sunset and holding hands in front of the mountains. Having been loved by him, I knew. In this life, he fell in love with the person he once said he hated the most. Because I rushed to him before they fell in love, he didn't experience the time when Doris abandoned him. Instead, it promoted their relationship. And I, alone with the memories of the previous life, was like a ridiculous clown. Since I failed, I have to accept the punishment. Lord System, what is my punishment? I asked calmly. The system said slowly. Not getting his wholehearted love, you will lose all your memories about him. You will remember everyone except him. Once, the most precious thing to me was the memories of Frederick and me. Every bit of it was the way he loved me. I was even afraid of forgetting in my sleep. After a long silence, the happy image of the couple kissing in my mind stabbed at me. I smiled and said, "Okay." The system took back the images, and everything was silent. Its operation was a bit slow, as if it was thinking about something. After a while, Sharon. It suddenly called me. In 1 month, you will completely forget him. But during this 1 month, he will gradually remember your previous life. This is the real punishment. When I returned to the wedding house, it was already completely dark. When I entered the door, Frederick was already there, still wearing the same clothes as at the wedding, looking dejected as he stared at me from the sofa. This house was bought by me after I was reborn. It was also our new house in the previous life. Every bit in the house was arranged by me according to the way it was in the previous life. His desk, his bookshelf, the lounge chair under his favorite slanting sun. I carefully put them together based on my fragmented memories. It was the surprise I wanted to give him. Only until today did I realize that, from the very beginning to the very end, it had been just my own carnival. Where have you been? I've been calling you but you never picked up. Frederick, who was on the sofa, got up and asked, reaching out to take my bag. I walked straight past him and dropped the bag steadily on the console table. His expression froze for a moment, but he quickly put on a faint smile. Sharon, have you eaten? I've cooked your favorite sweet and sour spare ribs. Wash your hands and come eat. He acted as if nothing had happened, meeting my cold gaze. He feigned a look of grievance. Sharon, I'm sorry. It was an emergency today and I didn't have time to explain too much to you. When I got back, you had already left. I've been looking for you for a long time. Please don't be angry, okay? My eyes were red, probably looking like a pitiful and gullible rabbit. I ignored him and walked inside. There were 4 dishes and 1 soup on the table, sweet and sour spare ribs, fish-flavored eggplant, braised prawns, steamed fish, and a soup. All were my favorites. They were also his trump cards to coax me every time he made me angry in the previous life. The noble young master washed his hands and cooked for me. He would always pretend to be pitiful and say, "Honey, since you've eaten the meal, you can't be angry with me anymore." Sharon. As I walked past the dining table, the man suddenly grabbed my wrist. Sharon, it was my fault today. I know you're angry, he said cautiously. But I have nothing to do with Doris. She and I grew up together since we were kids. I just didn't want her to do something stupid. His voice was gentle, low and husky, and bewitching. Look, he was deceiving me again. In this life, he wanted to prove himself, had a falling out with his family, and started his own business. I also stayed by his side through thick and thin, giving up being a young lady to accompany him through hardships. How many times did I help him revise the plans until late at night while he was with Doris? How many times did I help him raise funds in my own name while he was with Doris? In the end, was it really nothing? Huh? I laughed, staring at him coldly. Nothing? I chewed on his words. Nothing, kissing on the rooftop. Nothing, you said it was always her that you loved. Nothing, you left me at our wedding. So, Frederick, it seems that I have nothing to do with you either. The window was open, and a cool breeze blew in slowly. Frederick's face stiffened. Sharon, you don't believe me? You had someone follow me? He was gripping too hard, with a look of guilty panic on his face. Sharon, since you saw Doris on the verge of jumping off the building, you should understand me. I was saving a life, I had no choice. Those were just expedient measures. Doris has an extreme personality and suffers from depression. If I hadn't gone, she really would have died. The man spoke hurriedly, eager to prove himself. He wanted to reach out and hug me, but I pushed him away forcefully. When I stepped back, the back of my hand hit a plate, and the sweet and sour pork fillet fell to the ground. Oh. So you're really a living saint in this world, saving all sentient beings. I smiled. Sharon. My sarcastic words probably stung him. His gaze turned cold as he glanced at the broken plate on the ground. Is this necessary? I've already apologized. What more do you want? Can't you control your temper as a young lady? I've been really tired after a busy day. Can't you stop being so unreasonable? After saying that, there was the sound of the door slamming shut as he left. The moon in August was much rounder than usual. Rejecting everyone's concern and throwing away my phone, I leaned against the window, holding the red wine that Frederick and I were supposed to drink together on our wedding night. I had been treasuring it for 3 years. Frederick, we're really not fated to be together. I looked at the scattered stars and smiled bitterly. When we got married in the previous life, we both just regarded it as an arranged marriage between wealthy families and didn't drink the wedding night wine. The same was true in this life. After drinking most of the bottle of wine, my head started to feel dizzy. When I called for someone, I remembered that I had refused my parents' company and given all the servants a holiday. Will I really forget you, Frederick? The moon didn't answer me. The starry sky tonight looked a lot like the one we saw on the top of Mount Tai in the previous life. When a meteor streaked across the sky that night, Frederick, who never believed in ghosts and gods, secretly made a wish. Meteor, please bless Frederick and Sharon to be together forever. So silly. When I woke up, a gauze-like light covered the cool quilt. Frederick was sitting by my bedside, with a flattering look on his face. Sharon, get up quickly. It's all arranged. Let's go get the marriage certificate after lunch, he said. I frowned and asked in confusion, get the marriage certificate? Why do we have to get it today? The person beside me was stunned. Sharon, stop joking. Don't you remember? We agreed that after the wedding, we would go get the marriage certificate the next day. But we didn't have a wedding, I answered truthfully. What was wrong with Frederick? He hadn't even proposed to me yet. We hadn't even chosen our wedding dresses. We only chose a diamond ring. Why were we going to get the marriage certificate? Sharon. The person beside me got inexplicably angry. Is there no end to this? The wedding can be reheld, the guests can be invited again. It's just a wedding. I've compromised again and again. I don't know how long you're going to keep making a fuss. Fine, if we don't get the marriage certificate, don't regret it. The gentle breeze blew, and the wooden door of my room suddenly closed. Looking at the angry figure of the man as he left, I furrowed my brows. Rehold the wedding? Was Frederick out of his mind? I'm not divorced. Why should we rehold the wedding? So what the system said was true. I would gradually forget things about Frederick. When the custom shop called me, I decided to get the ring back before I forgot about it. That ring was once the proof of our love. The ring was designed by Frederick himself in the previous life. When the two rings were clasped together, they were a pair. When separated, each one was engraved with the other's English name. When he got the ring back then, he happily showed it to me. Sharon, this is designed by me for you, symbolizing that we will never be separated. He carefully put the ring on my finger, like a little kid, holding my hand and looking at it again and again. And like a child, he showed it off to others, my wife. Sharon, you're here. The designer greeted me at the door when I entered. Sharon, the ring is ready. She was wearing pure white gloves and holding a custom-made box. The ring was placed in the center of the box. To set it off, they had deliberately placed a few white feathers around it. When I was about to try it on, someone beat me to it. Frederick, this ring fits me perfectly, Doris's shrill voice rang out. I looked up and saw Doris holding Frederick's arm, standing beside me. Encounters always happen when you least expect them. Apparently, Frederick didn't expect to meet me either. He quickly pulled his arm out of Doris's embrace. Sharon, it's not what you see. I'll explain it to you later. Explain it to me later? I looked at the man in front of me with a cold laugh. No need. Just give the ring back to me. I held out my hand. The woman provocatively curled her lips. Sharon was abandoned by Frederick at the wedding. This ring is of no use to you anymore. It's better to give it to someone who needs it. I may have forgotten some things. But I'm not stupid. When Doris spat out her seventh taunting sentence, I slapped her in the face. Her eyes were red with anger, but she could only pretend to be a pitiful little woman. So I might as well have my fill. I slapped her a few more times with both hands until her hair was all messy. Then Frederick grabbed my hand. Enough. Sharon, it was my fault that I left at the wedding. If you're angry, take it out on me. Don't make things difficult for an innocent person. He protectively put Doris behind him. The ring was pinched between his fingertips. You know she has depression. She tried to commit suicide again yesterday. I accompanied her to go out for a stroll today and she's just starting to get better. It's just a ring. Can't you just let her have it? This ring was paid for by me. I have the right to give it to anyone. Sharon, I'm going to give this ring to Doris today. The woman behind me had a swollen cheek but was smiling smugly with her lips curled. The hexagonal diamond on that ring reflected a blinding light. For a moment, I was a bit dazed. It seemed that I saw the gentle Frederick carefully putting the ring on my hand and saying, Sharon, this is designed by me for you, symbolizing that we will never be separated. It was already 4 a.m. when I got back to the house. Lola had just broken up with her boyfriend. I accompanied her in the bar for half the night. No, maybe it was she who accompanied me. We rarely went this crazy. The last time was in college when she managed to win over her aloof and handsome senior. Later, I was reborn and my world revolved around Frederick, and gradually we had less contact. The lights were on brightly in the house. Aunt Jo? I called out in surprise. Didn't she have a 7-day vacation? Why was she back already? Looking up, I found Frederick sitting quietly on the sofa. His eyes were full of exhaustion. When he looked at me, a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes. Sharon. He walked towards me. He slowly opened a ring box. Sharon, I got the ring back. It was my fault. I shouldn't have given it to someone else. It originally belonged to you. Sharon, I remember now. This is designed by me for you, symbolizing that we will never be separated. We once promised to put it on for each other. Frederick was sincere. An emotion called guilt could be easily seen in his eyes. He carefully took out the ring. When he wanted to put it on my hand, I dodged. I furrowed my brows. I thought this Frederick was a bit strange. I didn't quite understand what he was saying. What ring? What never being separated? Frederick, are you okay? Who made an agreement with you? I blinked and asked. Besides, I don't think this ring looks good, I said with disgust. As soon as the words were out, the room fell silent. Frederick's face stiffened and he looked at me in disbelief. Sharon, are you deliberately trying to annoy me, is that it? You won't forget our agreement, right? He stubbornly held that ugly ring and tried to put it on me. But when I refused with all my might, with a clang, it fell to the ground. Sharon, you clearly liked it the most. Why don't you want it? The man's stubborn voice came from behind me. I frowned. Is he really crazy? A paranoid? After the ring fell that day, Frederick disappeared for several days. Lola said it was the cold violence that men usually used. She said it didn't matter if there was no man. She would accompany me to celebrate my birthday properly and welcome a new life. When I saw the music restaurant, the corners of my mouth twitched. Is this the place you chose? Someone blushed. That's because my new target is playing the piano here. I sighed. Since breaking up with her aloof and handsome senior, this girl had quickly changed from a pure girl to a serial dater. Had she already got a new target just over 72 hours after the breakup? The music restaurant was a high-end one with not many guests. We sat by the window and could see the lights in the distance. Suddenly, a clear voice rang out, "Now, let's welcome this gentleman to play a piece of Für Elise for his female companion." The male host said. Hey, that's really romantic. Lola laughed but suddenly froze. I was sitting with my back to the piano stage. When I turned to look, I saw Frederick in a black suit, looking as elegant as a prince in front of the piano. Not far from him, Doris was looking at him affectionately. There was also a cake on the table. Für Elise. This piece of music had been played by Frederick for me both in the previous life and this life. He said to me, Sharon, if you like it, I'll accompany you to celebrate your birthday every year from now on. How about playing a piece for you every year? For Elise, for my little Alice. When the piece ended, there was thunderous applause. Perhaps they looked so well matched, a perfect couple. Many people were praising them. I should have been sad. But I found that I was indifferent. Lola's face changed and she cursed. She got up and strode towards Doris's table, then raised her hand and pressed Doris's head straight onto the cake. The cake was smashed and Doris screamed, desperately wiping the cream off her face. Lola! Frederick grabbed her with an unhappy look on his face. Apologize, he said. There was a hint of violence hidden in his eyes. Everyone has the responsibility to condemn a mistress. There's no way I'll apologize. The next moment, when Doris was about to hit Lola, I stood in front of her. I caught her slap and swung my small handbag at her face. Sharon. The woman was furious. Sharon. Frederick paused, looking at me with panicked eyes. So, he also knew that their relationship was not something to be seen in public. Sorry to disturb you too. I smiled gracefully. Here's my business card. Remember to go to the hospital to get your injury assessed. Miss Doris, my Sharon family can afford to pay for any compensation, even if we're drowning in money. I said calmly. Frederick wanted to chase after me, but Doris grabbed his arm. Frederick, you promised to accompany me to celebrate my birthday this year, she said urgently. He stopped in his tracks. I smiled at the door. After coming out of the restaurant, Lola and I went to the bar. The life of bright lights and wine seemed more suitable for us prodigals. Sure enough, being self-reliant was not my thing. There was no need to accompany someone through hardships. Sharon, out of so many people back then, why did you choose such a scumbag? Lola taunted me. She was drinking like there was no tomorrow. We just have bad luck. The one I liked was also a scumbag. He abandoned me for an opportunity to go abroad. He didn't know that my Lola family could easily send him abroad 8,000 times. Pa, scumbag. The liquor was strong. As I drank it, I remembered Frederick's first date with me in the previous life. Just because I said I wanted to eat a kind of local shrimp in France. He flew to France overnight to find it for me. He clearly loved racing so much, but because I said it was unsafe, he gave it up for me. Yes, why didn't we see that they were scumbags back then? I sighed. After sending Lola home and then hurrying back home, it was already dawn. Frederick was standing at the door, holding a cake in his hand. Sharon, happy birthday. He looked exhausted. I didn't know how long he had been standing there. The morning dew had wet his hair and he looked even more broken. My birthday has already passed. I said calmly. Sorry, Sharon, I forgot. I promised to accompany you to celebrate your birthday every year. And play for Elise only for you. I really just forgot that yesterday was also your birthday. He eagerly grabbed my hand as if to confess. I shook him off and the cake fell to the ground. Through the box, it was hard to tell what it looked like after falling, but it probably wasn't in good shape. Mr. Frederick, although we intended to have an arranged marriage between wealthy families, it's not good for you to lie like this. My birthday was celebrated by my parents, sister, and Lola. When did I ever trouble you? I said. The man was stunned on the spot. He desperately picked up the cake. Sharon, are you joking with me? What did you call me? Mr. Frederick? Frederick's eyes flashed with hurt and he grabbed my shoulders tightly with both hands. Sharon, I'm your Frederick. Since that day, Frederick seemed to be obsessed. He came to see me every day, stubbornly insisting on taking care of me. He said he had always been like this before. But I didn't remember any of it. Sometimes I thought he should go see a doctor. After all, he was just an arranged marriage partner. There was no need to be so solicitous. Doris called me to ask for a meeting and said to me provocatively, Miss Sharon wouldn't be afraid to come, would she? I smiled faintly and said, sure. Then I turned around and dialed Frederick's number. Miss Sharon, is it interesting for you to cling to Frederick like this? She got straight to the point. Doris was really direct. As soon as I sat down, she started talking. The woman in a pink Chanel-style suit was gently stroking her lower abdomen. I'm pregnant. Sharon, you're out of this game. She casually threw the color ultrasound report on the table. I didn't even look at it. Miss Doris, I think you've got it wrong. I'm not the one who got you pregnant. You should go to the man who did. Sharon, don't play dumb with me. I'm carrying Frederick's child. Now you're the one who's the other woman. There seemed to be osmanthus trees planted around. The wind blew and the trees swayed, and the sweet fragrance that wafted over was intoxicating. Oh. I nodded. Frederick? He's just someone I'm arranged to marry. If you like him, I'll just find another one. As soon as I said that, the woman in front of me opened her mouth in shock. There were footsteps behind me. When I turned around, I saw Frederick standing behind me with his phone in his hand, looking gloomy. Frederick. The woman seemed to be caught off guard by Frederick's arrival and stuttered a bit. Didn't you say that after spending your birthday with you, we'd have nothing to do with each other? The man said coldly. Doris stood up and as soon as she touched the man's arm, he pushed her away. Doris, I've never touched you. Are you really pregnant with my child? He asked. The air pressure was low and a chilly breeze was swirling around. The woman stood up trembling. And no. She replied. The man suddenly turned to look at me, his eyes shaking a bit. Sharon, she's not pregnant with my child. I've never touched her. The atmosphere was a bit solemn. As a socialite from a wealthy family, it was time to show my excellent ice-breaking skills. Mr. Frederick, well, it seems your girlfriend really loves you. Why don't we just call off this arranged marriage? I'm really not interested in being the other woman. I'll handle my parents. I'm sure I can persuade the 4 elders to dissolve our engagement. I was being really sincere. I even thought about taking the blame myself. But the man in front of me had red eyes, looking incredulous, and his hands were trembling as he pressed them on my shoulders. Sharon, what are you talking about? You're the one I love deeply. We've never been just an arranged marriage. You'll never be the other woman. The fragrance of osmanthus was too strong and I coughed involuntarily twice. I pushed the man's hands away and gently patted Frederick on the shoulder, saying earnestly, Mr. Frederick, do you even hear what you're saying? We've only met twice. How can I be the one you love the most? You should get treatment if you're sick. Or should I recommend a mental hospital for you? 16. Sure enough, he was seriously ill. Frederick came to my house every day. To be honest, among the people I've known, he was the first one who was so desperate for an arranged marriage. Lola invited me to go to the seaside to play. When I got there, I found out it was all a setup by Frederick. Sharon, do you remember? We've been here together 3 times. We fell in love here and kissed here. Sharon, I confess my love to you right here. He said. After saying that, he looked at me with those affectionate eyes that seemed to be even affectionate when looking at a dog. He got down on one knee. Sharon, I said I'd come to marry you again. The ring was shining brightly, reflecting dazzling light. I frowned in confusion. Frederick, is the Frederick family going bankrupt? Are you so eager to get into an arranged marriage? We've only met once. Where did the falling in love, kissing, and confessing come from? Are you delusional? My words stunned the man. When he came to his senses, he hugged me tightly in his arms. Sharon, what's wrong with you? You're just teasing me on purpose, right? You can't possibly forget the things between us. Before he could finish speaking, his phone buzzed. When he took it out, we both saw the name Doris. I raised my eyebrows. He angrily threw the phone into the water. I took the opportunity to slip out of his arms. Looking at the innocent phone that flickered a few times on the shoal and then went dark, I sighed and bent down to pick it up. Then I considerately stuffed it into the man's hand. Mr. Frederick, when a young couple quarrels, stay calm. Don't take it out on your phone, the seawater, or those flowers and plants. It doesn't look magnanimous at all. 17. On the way back, Frederick sped up to 200 miles per hour. His face was gloomy. Probably he was so eager to go back because he missed his girlfriend so much. Sharon, why don't you scold me? Don't you dislike it the most when I speed? I was tightly gripping the armrest on the passenger side. It wasn't that I disliked it. I was clearly afraid of dying. It's okay. Do as you like. I couldn't expect too much from someone I'd only met once. I was so tolerant that I was almost like a saint who would be killed in troubled times. But the person beside me suddenly got angry. The speed dropped suddenly. So this guy was like a husky. He just liked to do the opposite of what others wanted. The car stopped in front of an upscale hospital. Frederick, as if afraid that I would run away, grabbed me and strode inside. I wasn't too scared because I had a friend in this hospital. As soon as Frederick saw Glenn, he handed me over to him. One doctor after another tested me for this and that. The final result was that there was nothing wrong with my brain. How could that be? Frederick frowned. Glenn, are you sure? Glenn's flirtatious peach blossom eyes blinked slightly. He said, based on my years of experience, Sharon probably has selective amnesia. I've encountered 2 cases like this before. They were both under severe stimulation and the brain activated its protection mechanism, resulting in selective amnesia. In other words, she remembers everything about everyone except the person who stimulated her. Frederick, when you left Sharon alone at the wedding, didn't you ever think about how much stimulation she would receive? Look, she even remembers the time when I went to steal bird eggs with her when we were kids, but she forgets everything about you too. You can see how deeply you've hurt her. After the man finished speaking, Frederick's face was as pale as paper. He reached out his hand to me, but his fingertips were trembling. Sharon, I'm sorry. I didn't know you would be so stimulated. There were tears in his eyes and a crocodile tear slid down. What a good confession. I should have felt empathetic. Unfortunately, I just stood there impassively. Sigh. After all, I didn't quite understand what they were talking about. Glenn's peach blossom eyes were even moved and he sighed. Why bother? Anyway, you have your Doris. Does it matter whether Sharon remembers you or not? After coming back from the hospital, Frederick suddenly became silent. He would come to knock on my door every day, bringing me flowers, cakes, and all kinds of gifts. Again and again, I suspected that the Frederick family might really be going bankrupt. I heard that the painting of my favorite painter was going to be auctioned. Lola and I excitedly flew to France. I was nervous throughout the whole process. Finally, I learned that the painting had been purchased in advance for 80 million yuan and would not be auctioned anymore. Sharon, you're here too. Doris looked a bit haggard but still had that mean look. When she saw me, it was like a fighter jet switching to combat mode. Miss Sharon probably doesn't know that Frederick spent 80 million yuan to buy the painting of Mr. Tsongyu for me. Bastard. Lola was so irritated by her words that she blurted out a Chinese curse. I reached out to stop Lola, who was about to tear Doris apart. Who's Frederick? I asked sincerely. As soon as the voice fell, there was silence all around. When I turned around, I saw a man behind me. He was really good-looking, with a distinct jawline, a tall and slender figure, broad shoulders and a narrow waist, and deep eyes. Frederick is me. He walked up to me, waved his hand, and his assistant walked over with a painting in his arms. Madam, this is the painting the president bought for you, he said. I frowned as I looked at the painting I'd liked for a long time and then at the man in front of me. We've never met before. This painting is too precious. I can't afford it. I can't afford it. Lola, let's go. This was originally yours. The man stubbornly pushed the painting into my arms. Sharon, recently I've remembered many things, and each and every one of them is about you and me. We fell in love by the seaside, we hugged under the sunset. I bought this painting and stored it in the safe with your birthday as the password. I blocked a knife for you and made a wish to come and marry you in the next life. Sharon, I finally understand why, in these 3 years, you were always so eager to make me remember something with one thing after another. You also had those memories, right? The man in front of me looked lost. In the spirit of humanitarianism, I should have comforted him. But I frowned for a long while before realizing that I really wasn't that sympathetic. I blinked my eyes, trying to make myself look more amiable. Sir, I'm afraid you've mistaken me for someone else. I don't even know you. After saying that, I looked at Lola. Lola, did I know him before? Lola tossed her hair, lifted her chin. Know his grandma's legs. I'm hungry. We should guard against fire, theft, and wild men. Let's go, go quickly. Lola pushed the painting away, stuffed it to the man's secretary, and dragged me away. Frederick, I want this painting. The woman's feigned weak voice came from behind. Then came the man's words, get lost. 20. The flowers at home were coming more and more frequently. Unfortunately, I didn't know who sent them. So I simply asked Aunt Jo to arrange them in the garden every day, and gradually it became a flower bed. Sharon, come and pick me up at the bar. Glenn called me bluntly. I was too lazy to bother with this guy at first, but my future brother-in-law's illness still needed his father to treat. When I arrived at the bar, I saw him drinking with a man in the booth. The man looked haggard, with deep dark circles under his eyes, but his good looks were still hard to conceal. He was drunk, his eyes blurry, tightly gripping the wine bottle, adding a sense of brokenness to him. I've brought the person you wanted. The guy with the flirtatious eyes said. Sharon. The man walked towards me, staggering. Sharon, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I forgot your birthday, that I lied to you, that I left at the wedding and let you be ridiculed, that I'm such an asshole. Sharon, I'm sorry. I didn't know where this drunk came from. He grabbed my hand and desperately hit himself in the face with it. Sharon, please don't leave me. No. I pushed the man forcefully to Glenn. The man blinked his flirtatious eyes. Sharon, he gets drunk every day. If you don't do something about it, he'll really be ruined. Pretending to have amnesia for a while is enough. You seem to be addicted to it. Anyway, there's no one else here. Tell me about it. I don't know what you're talking about. Boring. I glared at Glenn fiercely. Then I turned and left. Behind me, in the unoccupied area, the drunk man sat up, hugging his head tightly with both hands and crying bitterly. Glenn, she really doesn't want me anymore. She really forgot me. What should I do? Serves you right. Glenn poured a glass of wine and downed it in one gulp. Frederick, when you placed Doris in the villa next to yours, I warned you that Sharon wasn't as docile as she seemed on the surface. She's the daughter of the Sharon family. She was willing to endure hardships with you for 2 years. You should have known that her heart is as strong as steel. She could be wholeheartedly good to you, and when betrayed by you, she would also resolutely abandon you. I have nothing to do with Doris, neither in the past, nor now, nor in the future. The man looked up, his eyes red from drinking, and defended himself. Glenn stood up, put down his glass, and tightly gripped Frederick's collar. Frederick, emotional infidelity is also infidelity. Holding hands, kissing, keeping a mistress, just for the sake of novelty, you've done all the things that couples do, except going to bed. Do you think you're clean? Stop pretending to be so innocent in front of me. After saying that, Glenn pushed the man hard onto the sofa. He straightened his clothes and kicked the wine bottle away with one foot. Being half-hearted, all of this is your own doing. Frederick, you'll never know how desperate she was when you left her alone at the wedding. You won't understand how much I regretted it when I was in France and couldn't be by her side at that time. Time really flies. 30 days passed in the blink of an eye. I stood quietly on the rooftop of the Sharon family building. Ding dong, Sharon, we meet again. A cold mechanical voice rang in my mind. I calmly looked into the distance. Doris is dead. The system said in a low voice. I frowned. Want to see? It asked. I nodded. The system spun, and a picture appeared in my mind. On the rooftop of the Frederick family's twin towers, Doris's frail figure was standing there. Frederick, she called softly. Frederick was standing in front of her, looking haggard. He didn't know how much he had drunk, and he was reeking of alcohol. Did you deceive me with Sharon? He asked loudly. Doris's face was pale. Frederick, I had no choice. You always ignored me. I could only force you to come to me like this. She looked a bit charming when crying. The man laughed coldly. Doris, stop pretending. You were the one who kidnapped Sharon in the previous life, right? This life you have memories, so you didn't abandon me. You pretended to be pitiful with your depression, threatened to commit suicide again and again, and used your mother's kindness to me to blackmail me. You drove a wedge between me and Sharon. The man's eyes were full of regret. The teardrops on the woman's cheeks froze. Hee hee. She laughed. No wonder you've been so abnormal lately. So you've also regained your memories. Frederick, what, now you want to put all the blame on me to make yourself look affectionate? Don't forget that you said Sharon's love for you was too overwhelming and suffocating you. You said I had a sense of novelty. You hid me next to her. In the previous life, she must not have known that it was you who saved me in the nightclub, arranged me in your friend's company, and gave me hope of getting back together, so I planned the kidnapping of her. Frederick, admit it. It was you who ruined everything. The woman's words were like sharp knives, stabbing the man's heart. He sneered at the corners of his mouth, looking crazy. Wasn't it because of your repeated disruptions? If it weren't for your seduction, Sharon and I wouldn't have missed each other in this life. She loved me so much. If she hadn't been stimulated, she wouldn't have forgotten me. Doris, it was you who ruined everything again and again. Aren't you fond of jumping off buildings? Frederick suddenly reached out, his eyes filled with a fierce look like an azura, and his big hand tightly gripped Doris's neck. Fine, then I'll let you jump enough. Doris looked panicked, her body pressed tightly against the edge of the rooftop. She shook her head desperately. She wanted to say something, but before she could make a sound, her body felt light and she was pushed out forcefully. She stared wide-eyed, in disbelief. When she died, her eyes didn't even close. The scene changed. There were many people gathered downstairs. The police had set up a yellow cordon. A group of people rushed onto the rooftop and Frederick was taken away by the police. Sharon. He suddenly muttered to himself like a madman, "Would you still be willing to marry me in the next life?" It was a tragedy. The system watched the scene quietly. What are your thoughts? The system asked. I wanted to buy osmanthus flowers and drink wine together, but in the end, it's not the same as when we were young. I smiled. I remembered that before Frederick died in the previous life, he stubbornly wiped away the tears from the corners of my eyes. He also asked me, "Sharon, if there's an afterlife, would you let me come and marry you again?" I nodded too eagerly back then, but I knew that at this moment, my answer was no. The person in the picture seemed to be stunned as if hearing my words. After a moment, a bitter smile hung on his lips. A tear rolled down his cheek. Right, I don't deserve it. The gentle breeze blew away the picture and made my eyes sting. My past with Frederick was like a dream. Happiness, pain, joy, and misfortune all became passing clouds at this moment. So did I pass the test? I asked the system. Yes, everything was just a test. A test about my acting skills and determination. I remembered everyone, and I also remembered Frederick. I never forgot. Because escaping through losing memories is never a skill. Being sober and not loving is the redemption of oneself. The system spun quickly in my mind. After a while, it finally stopped. Ding dong, congratulations, host. You've successfully bound the system. Next, you will take over from your sister and complete the quick transmigration tasks for the next 5 years. Good luck, host. It said. I was caught off guard by the sudden change in the system's attitude. I stared at the floating clouds in the distance. So my sister can finally go home, right? I asked tremblingly. The system nodded. Tears suddenly streamed down my eyes. That's good. So I won't owe her anymore. My sister was the previous quick transmigration host. She bound the system to save her sweetheart. She completed the tasks again and again, and her sweetheart gradually got better. Originally, her sweetheart had woken up, and she could break free from the system and return to the normal world. That was what she had been longing for 5 years. But she chose to sign another 8-year contract with the system without hesitation to give me a chance to be reborn to fulfill my one-time whim. You humans are so strange. When I helped you to be reborn last time, your sister's expression was exactly the same as yours now. The system was curious. I gently wiped away the tears on my cheeks and smiled. Of course. That's for sure. She's my sister. The sister who has been protecting me since I was a kid. So this time, it's my turn to protect her. Oh. The system's mouth was round, opening and closing, looking rather funny. Well, host, get ready. Let's start. Quick transmigration to save the plane, the first world, when a drama queen transmigrates into the female lead of a cruel romance novel. System code 009. Task difficulty 4 stars. Host, this is the drama queen persona customized for you by the system. We're about to set off.